I think people are always going to be telling stories, fiction. The vector, the way we tell them may change. We may read ebooks, we may read on our phone, we may read some different way. We're always going to read. We're always going to need stories.
Welcome to Your Creative Mind. I'm Isolde Trachtenberg, and this podcast is all about using your innate creativity and mindfulness to build a life you love. Whether it's through writing, music, dance, theater, or any creative pursuit, we'll explore how to tap into your unique potential to transform your work, relationships, and daily life. Through inspiring conversations with world-changing artists, entrepreneurs, and innovators, or actionable insights in my solo episodes, you'll learn how to focus your energy, ignite your creativity, and bring more joy and purpose to everything you do. Hey there, and welcome to the Your Creative Mind podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your attention more than you could possibly know. I'm super excited to introduce you to this week's guest for a number of reasons, not the least of which is we were both DJs in college, in high school. And we spent a little time chatting about our air names and being DJs and being in that part of media. So I'm very excited to talk to Kathleen, but let me tell you about Kathleen Marple Kalb. Now, here's what's interesting, okay? You need to think about it this way. What does it take to balance breaking news, write gripping mysteries, and raise a family all at the same time? Kathleen knows all of this firsthand. She's an award-winning radio anchor and acclaimed author, and she crafts cozy mysteries that challenge conventions, tackling everything from anti-Semitism to serious health issues, all while keeping her readers hooked. We're going to talk about navigating a publishing debut in the chaos of 2020, navigating releasing 2 books on the same day, which is coming right up, the real-life inspirations behind her stories, and the lessons she's learned from a career in radio news. If you've ever struggled to juggle passion, career, and family, this episode is going to be full of insights you're not going to want to miss. Kathleen, thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. This is wonderful. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. So we know each other from Sisters in Crime, and which
Right,
is
nice thing.
yeah. And it is sort of women or those who identify as women and some men, from what I see, who write mysteries. There's a national, there's the New York and Connecticut and I guess New Jersey area sync chapter, which is what we're both a part of. And you are, every time I've heard you speak, I have been, oh, I need to get her on the show because she's so super cool. And so I'm very excited that you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Absolutely. I want to just jump right in and go, wow, you're doing a lot. You're anchoring news, you're writing mysteries, you're raising a family. It sounds really like an impossible juggling act. So I want to just start right away and go, what's the secret for keeping it all moving without dropping any of those balls?
Well, you can't, none of us can really do it all. You know, that whole thing that whole 1980s TV commercial about the woman coming in with the Anjali perfume and that I can bring up the bacon and fry it up in a pan and all that. That's garbage. In
Mm,
real life, it's messy. In real life, you admit that it's messy, and you save what you can and you do what you can when you can.
hmm
And you don't beat yourself up when you can't. To the
Oh,
best of your ability, to the best of your ability, which I'm not great at. I mean, there's always going to be, you have to acknowledge it. There's always going to be something you miss. And
yeah.
and you're going to have to give up things, you know? Um, I'm not talking out of school to tell you that I have been offered network radio jobs at least twice. And I've said no because the first question was, would you like to work for us? And my first question was, can you work around my family schedule? And the answer was no.
And that was
And
that, right? I
and that was the
mean,
end of that. Yeah. I have one child, and we were very lucky to get him here. And I had him when I was 42, and we were very lucky to get him here. And there's just things I won't do. And not being here for him is one of those.
Absolutely. And it's interesting as I hear you, I don't have human children. I have cat children, which is a very, very different kettle of corn, because they don't mind if I'm half an hour late, that kind of thing. But at the same time, I'm curious a little bit about how juggling all of those balls informs your writing, because to me, things that happen to me in real life, things that affect me in real life. So can you talk a little bit about what that's like for you, what you grab from maybe even the headlines as you read radio news, but what does real life bring to these mysteries that you write?
I write a lot. All but one of my characters are mothers.
Mm.
And initially I didn't initially write parents because parenting was too close to me and I wasn't sure I could do it. And then I wrote a character who was a mother, and I never went back because it's just such a rich vein of humor and relatability, and it's hilariously fun. Everybody who has raised a child, however the child got here, however they got the child got here, everybody understands, the messy moment and the kids screaming and you're trying to finish something else. And there's just a lot of stuff there. And and if you're a writer, there's a lot of ways you process it. And it gives a grounding to the mysteries, I think, that makes them more relatable.
You're going to hear me pause or hear me not say anything. I have embraced the pause because I sort of synthesize what I'm hearing so that I can.
I think that's great.
So,
as radio people, we are taught to hate silence.
I know.
And I think it's wonderful that you take a moment and think. I love that. So,
oh, well, thank you.
I'm totally with you.
Awesome. And so in that pause, I kind of went, okay, so you're writing moms, and they have sort of rich, busy, super lives outside of the mysteries that they're tasked with solving or that they're in the middle of, embroiled in. And as you're doing that, I guess one of the things that keeps coming into my mind, again, I'm not a mom. I don't have human children. But at the same time, I feel like there's, and one of my cats just made it into my studio and is trying to climb up me. Don't do that, kitten. Here's the thing, though. I feel like in listening to you, I'm going, okay, are there skills that you have as a mother that your characters use to perhaps solve their mysteries or to make headway? And if so, what are they, and how do you incorporate them into the stories?
Absolutely. There's stuff you learn from parenting, but also from managing a busy life. The whole multitasking thing is real. Those of us who are more than one thing get good at being more than one thing.
Mm.
That really comes in handy, actually, in the what I call the Grace the Hit Mom mysteries. She's a part-time lawyer, full-time mother, and secret assassin.
I love that.
She belongs to this. Yeah, I love Grace. And Grace is probably Grace isn't the character who's closest to my heart, but she's the one who's the most fun to write because Grace belongs to this 700-year-old order of women who take out evil men.
Nice.
That's the MacGuffin. They're this order of assassins, and they just very quietly poison evil men and keep on walking, and they get away with it because of white woman privilege.
That's so interesting.
It's it's topical and it's fun, but Grace gets away with her stuff, gets away with everything because she plays on all of the assumptions that people make about mothers and people who work part-time and mother full-time, and nice, well-behaved women. And this is all stuff that I've observed over the years, being a nice, well-behaved suburban mom during the week when I'm a radio anchor on the weekends. Mostly I work weekends and holidays, and then I'm a mom during the week. And so I've just observed a lot of the way people think about you and talk to you. No slam. I'm not going to tell you who said this to me because it's somebody that I have considerable respect for, and she just didn't think when she said it. A colleague of mine, when I'd written my first book, I said, and yeah, I have a book coming out in March. And she looked at me like the cat had just quoted Hamlet. Because she thought of me primarily as the little mommy who works on weekends. And it was like, you've used your uterus and you can write a book?
Huh.
It's like, sweetheart, The two do not talk to one another. It was, yeah, it was, and I've had that happen to me more. I've had that happen to me more than once. Had that happen to me more than once over time. People think that mothers can't, for some reason, can't be, other things that somehow, usually with people who haven't had children, that people, if you're a parent, you're using all of your energy for that.
Mm. Absolutely. And you know what's interesting in listening to what you're saying, I'm kind of going, there's an underestimation factor, like mothers in this situation, you specifically, they're underestimating you. They're underestimating your energy, your dedication, and the skills that you've developed in order to parent a child. I never had children because I just didn't think I could handle all those responsibilities. Plus I raised my baby sister. So I did what I needed to do. And yet, when you're in that situation and you're in the day to day, we end up in these moments where we have to steal the time to write, to create. And you did it and you've done it. And I guess the thing that I'm kind of interested in is that your first book came out in April 2020 when the world was anything but normal. And so you were working on it at a time right before the pandemic, but then trying to get your head around talking about it, about promoting it, about getting it sold. All of that must have just been mind bending while you're also trying to do your career on the weekends, raise your baby. I don't know how old your child was at that point, but you're doing all
7.
Okay. So you were doing all of this stuff and you had a full-time kid at home because we were all at home. So I guess I'm wondering what that taught you about resilience in publishing and beyond.
Basically, we had to build the plane in the air, and I just kept on going. I think the answer is that it's really all about, you put your blinders on and you keep going. At least it was for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's the right thing. I'm not saying I was great to be around at the time, but that's how I got through it. I just didn't admit any other possibility. I'm terrible at giving up.
I love that. What a great way to say it. I just suck at giving up. I'm not good at it. I
do. I can never admit defeat. I mean, that's like the one thing I've never been able to do, which probably isn't a bad thing as a general global rule, but can be a real pain in the backside if you're with me on a particular thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There is a never say die sort of attitude that I think writers have to have in order to get to the point where they get to type the end, and also get to the point where they're looking for editors or looking for agents, finding somebody to publish their work, and then doing all of the stuff you have to do to promote the work, right? And so I guess the thing that I'm wondering about is your books themselves tackle really serious themes that we don't always see in cozy mysteries. And so you've taken sort of the expected way of looking at cozy mysteries and turned it on its head a little bit in a time where people are still reeling from one of the worst sort of natural or world disasters that anybody can remember since the Spanish flu outbreak in the early 20th century. So I guess I'm wondering, within that framework, as you're doing this, as you're writing, as you're creating, as you're sort of synthesizing the news that as an anchor, the things that you're doing for your, we're going to call it weekend job, not day job, since you work weekends and holidays, you're still writing cozies, and I'm going to ask you to explain what a cozy is for those who are listening who don't know, but you're infusing those, you're sort of pushing the boundaries. And I'm wondering, is that because of the work that you do, or are you just a natural boundary pusher regardless of the career that you have outside of the writing career?
I think probably the latter, because I've never liked the conventional options. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania I joke that I grew up in Western Pennsylvania in the 1950s. It wasn't really the 1950s, but it felt like it. A nice girl would become a nurse or a teacher, and there's nothing wrong with being a nurse or a teacher. The world needs those. Don't get me wrong. I just wasn't called to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And and it was and my mother, God rest her, firmly believed that, a son seeks his fortune, a daughter is yours to keep.
Hmm.
And so it was really hard for her to let me go notice how I put that, let me stay in Pittsburgh after college and work in radio, and then let me go to Vermont and follow my career to Connecticut and later New York. That was tough for her. And before I ever got into the mystery world, I'd already done a lot of things that people like me don't normally do. And then, I just don't know how to write a story other than with the character. My stories start with my characters. And since I work in a very diverse world with very interesting and difficult things happening occasionally, my characters are very diverse. There's almost always undramatically people who are, gay people who are married, and it's not a big deal. And people who are from different religious backgrounds. Number of my characters are Jewish by choice because I am, or I will be very soon.
Oh, wow.
So,
Congratulations.
thank you. We're not there yet. No need for congratulations yet. But I've been living, but my husband is Jewish. I've been living the life for 20 years. I just haven't gotten legal until now because of a lot of family issues. My husband's a cancer survivor, and we've been through a lot of stuff on this end. So, so I've always done a lot. I've always been somebody who's not conventional, and I suppose the fact that I sort of fell into the most conventional genre of all is pretty weird. That's obviously pretty strange. Cozy about cozies. Let's talk about cozies. Cozy mystery is on probably the lightest of the mystery genres. Would you say?
I would agree.
Cozies involve usually one murder of a very unappealing victim that takes place off screen. The detective is an amateur sleuth, usually a female. There's a cast of quirky characters. There's usually a fun animal. Usually some kind of fun animal involved, animal side characters. And there may be some light paranormal stuff involved, a friendly ghost points you in the right direction or some such. But so it's generally very light, and it's intended it's escapist mysteries, and everything ends up all right in the end, and nothing too bad happens to the main characters. And until recently, and I'm not the first person to be writing unusual or diverse cozies. I mean, there's Rob Osler's out there writing what he calls quosies, queer cozies. And there are a lot of people, I'm thinking of Jennifer Chow and Mia Manasala, and Raquel Reyes, who are writing cozies from different ethnicities, in different racial and ethnic groups. So there's a lot of diversity coming into that space. But the characters that I write, I wouldn't, I couldn't write those characters without having some difficult stuff go on. My first Vermont radio mystery, Live, Local, and Dead, came out in 2022, I think. And it includes the main character is Jewish by choice, and because she's taking over a radio station from a satellite talk show, kind of, hard right talk show hate. We all know what that's like. She took over the radio station and took it local, and people didn't like, some of the hard righties didn't like that. And so there's all kinds of weirdness. And at one point, there's even an anti-Semitic incident. And the whole town rallies around her. It's actually a very nice moment in the story, and it's kind of after school special. But I guess the reason I write stuff like that in cozies is because it's my way to make things come out right in the end. I get to make it all come out okay in the end.
Yeah, and I love that, actually. That kind of escapism is wonderful for me. It's one of the reasons, speaking of cozies, I'm a huge Lillian Jackson Braun fan.
Oh, yeah, she's great.
Yeah, and so all the cat, if you don't know who I'm talking about, read any of the Cat Who cozy mystery novels. They're Coco and Yum Yum are the two Siamese cats that James Quillerin, who's a former newspaper reporter, lives with, and they run roughshod all over him, frankly. But he solves mysteries. Anyway, the reason I brought her up, she was also a newspaper person. She was in media, and grew up in Michigan, which is where I grew after my family immigrated, which is where I grew up. And I guess the question that I have, because my stories revolve, I don't know that I have I'm Jewish, but I don't know that I have particularly Jewish characters in my work. Yet a lot of the stuff that I learned when I was in Michigan, I went to the University of Michigan, growing up there, part of the whole tarot card thriller books that I write, for example, the families from Moldova, which is the country I was born in. So a lot of my early life informs a lot of my fiction, even though it's not autobiographical. Tell me, Kathleen, how much of you grew up in Western Pennsylvania, how much of that influences how you write and how you push those boundaries?
Oh, a lot. All of my contemporary main characters are either from Western Pennsylvania or somewhere in the vicinity. It just, I have attended, I think one of them is one of them's from Ohio, but most of them are from the vicinity of where I grew up.
Mm.
It gives them a grounding, I think. That's something that I can relate to with them. And they often have similar experiences to things that I've done, or would like to have done. Grace is a lawyer because I wish I had studied better the night before the LSATs instead of going out with my friends.
Ah, yes. I hear you.
So yeah, I mean, that's definitely in there. And I think the Vermont main character, it's setting as a more experienced writer now, I probably wouldn't set her up to be quite as autobiographical as she is.
Mm.
But she's very similar to me in the background, in the career path, and in some personal stuff. She's much more similar to me than anybody else I've written, and I don't know that I would do that again.
Yeah, and it is interesting, isn't it? As you develop as a writer, you stretch your own boundaries, not just the sort of the topics, the themes of your work, but what you're willing to do. And we touched on it briefly earlier, and I guess I have to ask you, why do you think it's important to you to weave some of these real world issues into your work, and how do you balance that with the lighter elements of cozy mysteries, of the genre itself?
Well, I think anytime I write anything, everybody who I like is going to end up okay in the end. The one thing I think the reason I had trouble at the beginning of my career with getting my first book was a historical series that I still write, and the plot was a little different than the conventional light historical. And I think the reason that the reviews were a little uneven is people didn't trust me enough to bring it home. They didn't know me well enough to trust me. I think a more experienced writer with a track record probably would have gotten away with that book. But I mean, it's one thing you have to know about me. In the end, everybody we like will be okay. They may be dented a little bit. They may have a little PTSD from something nasty happening, but they'll be basically okay.
Okay, so here's something that
so that's a big part of it.
I think that notion of everybody that you like, that you're meant to like, is going to be okay, and that sort of fits into readers' expectations. And I want to actually touch on this because this is something I'm so curious about with every author I talk to. You could have your Agatha Christie style mysteries, you could have your Dashiell Hammett style mysteries, you could have, you have police procedurals, you have an amateur sleuth, you have these things, and people are interested in reading sort of their genre that they're interested in reading. And like you said, the readers weren't sure what to make of what you were writing, so it wasn't as on point for them. But I guess the question is, what are your thoughts on this facet of it, that it's become so segmented, if you will, about the kinds of mysteries, the kinds of stories that people expect from an author, and their reactions when the author sort of moves a little bit away from that, but also just in general that the publishing industry has such a categorized view of what's accepted and how often writers can feel free to switch over a little or to expand what they're doing.
Oh, it's very siloed. I think that's pretty clear. And that's unfortunate because people try to do something that is a little different or tell a story that maybe isn't quite what people were hoping, that may take you a place you're a little bit uncomfortable, even if we bring you back in the end. And it's unfortunate. And it's unfortunate that people don't step outside their boundaries a little bit, which I understand. You read for comfort, you read for escape, but escape is also going to some place you haven't been before.
I love that last sentence so very much. In some ways, that's so very, I mean, you could be escaping to somewhere familiar, but often you can also escape to somewhere that's completely new. And
that's
I
why
absolutely,
I read memoirs.
yeah,
I read a lot of memoirs and a lot of nonfiction about like different times in history because I like to be in somebody else's shoes in some other place and find out what it was like to be them.
yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, and it also, I'm sure, informs how you write and how you form your characters. As I interview authors, I interview a lot of people who write nonfiction or fiction, but I get sent these galleys, and so the publishers will send me the galleys, and I'll read the book before interviewing the person. And it's really always fun for me when it's a nonfiction because I learn a lot, provided they've done their research, I learn a lot. So I'm going to ask you a kind of a strange and roundabout question. I know that you've got 2 books coming out in one day at the end of March, which is just what? I don't know how you're doing that. But I guess what I'm wondering is, in the writing of it, 2 books, I don't know if you wrote them at the same time concurrently or if you wrote one a while ago and somehow it just happened that you're releasing both on the same day. But tell me about what you learned while writing one that informed the other.
Well, this is what I learned was an awful lot about the publishing industry, because the reason this is happening is that the tiny little press that had Grace was sold to a much larger independent press.
Ah.
And so the Grace series is now with a whole new publisher, and they set a different date for the book one of the books that is coming out on the 25th of March. Grace, it's Grace the Hit Mom #2, called Hound of the Bonnevilles.
Great title.
Yeah, partly mine and partly my original publishers.
Mm.
And so Hound of the Bonnevilles was supposed to be a July 24 book. And when the press was sold, it was sold to Turner, and Keylight Books is the imprint, and they're terrific. And they wanted some time to have a little publicity runway, and so they moved it to March of 25. The other one is Stuff of Mayhem with Level Best, which is my Home for Two series, and there were just some glitches, and that was intended as a November book, and it ended up as a March book. So none of this was supposed to happen. But here we are.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And we end up in these situations where those kinds of conversations, you learn a lot, like you said, about the publishing industry, but you also, in a way, have to split yourself in 2, I think, in order to be able to do that, right? As someone who's got 2 books coming out, I've never done that. I've written 9 books, and there's no way I'm ever going to do that. But if I were to imagine, for example, are you using a pen name? And if so, which one? And are they different people in your mind? For example, my pen name, and I keep toying with actually using her name in a series I want to write, is Natasha Tyler, in part because it's just easier to say than Isolde Trachtenberg, and it's way easier to spell. But she's also, in my mind, a little bit more impish and a little bit more saucy and sassy than I am. So in this, when you're writing these books, when you're talking about the books, I know, for example, that you're Kathleen, but are there differences between your personality and how you approach the promo, the publishing boom you have to go on in order to promote these books? And how are you going to navigate that when it's 2 books on the same day?
Well, originally Nikki Knight, that's my pen name, which was chosen by my husband. I was looking for, this was originally for the Vermont Radio Mysteries, my husband was, I said I wanted to come up with a DJ name. And I was trying out various things, Crystal Star and stuff. And my husband comes up behind me and says, I'm Nikki Knight. So there you go. Originally, Nikki had a separate look, and I kind of branded it differently. I'm actually wearing her jacket today. It's a purple leather motorcycle jacket. It's a motorcycle jacket, but a little bit less, tough guy than a black one would be. But as I moved through and started writing a lot of short stories under both pen names, and I had one really good author photo that I like a whole heck of a lot. I ended up using them for both.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of, and also kind of everybody in the writing world knows it's all me at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a branding thing, but I think everybody knows it's all me at this point.
And it's interesting because I had people tell me many moons ago, I had them tell me, you should come up with a pen name for your first book, which was a nonfiction book all about the elements. And they were like, you should definitely use not Isolde Trachtenberg, but you should come out. And I said, yeah, I could be Evening Star Songbottom, and I'll write under that pen name. And just as a joke, and then I went, Evening Star Songbottom, and she became the main character of my first urban fantasy series. So there you go. You never know how these things will work. But here's the thing, right? Coming back to, and I keep coming back to real life, you write strong, complicated women, and you live kind of a complicated life. And so I guess I'm wondering, within the writing and within your own life, what's the biggest challenge women still face in news and in publishing today?
Just getting the chance to do the work. Sometimes we can do the work. Just give us a chance to do it.
Is this like a foot in the door kind of thing? Or because, you and I talked earlier about the fact that you push boundaries and you are traditionally published. You've got your books with the press. Have you ever considered going independent and publishing your own work? Or are you more interested in breaking the boundaries in traditional publishing rather than going through independent means?
I think at this point, having, by the time my contracts are up, if I don't sign anything more, I'll have had 14 traditionally published books. 14. And that's pretty good. But at that point, I will reevaluate and decide what I want to do. And that might well include independent publishing.
And I know writers who do both, right? They go, I'll do traditional publishing for this stream of my writing and independent publishing for something else.
And actually, that's kind of where I am with the Vermont radio series at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I did the second Vermont radio book came out through the Wild Rose Press, and it was a good experience. I'm not downing on them in any way. They were very good to me. But as far as timing and everything else going on in my life, I think if there's going to be a Vermont #3, and for those of you who like the Vermont series, and I know they're out there, part of Vermont #3 is written. The timing, the timing and everything else that is going on in my life, Vermont #3 is going to come out on my terms as an independent thing when it comes out, because I just don't have the bandwidth to commit to a publishing contract with a time certain right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to try it.
And that's the thing. This, to me, having the sort of the power in your own hands to make those decisions is something that's really important for me personally. I like to know where all the I's are dotted and how all the T's are crossed. And yet I keep coming back to how busy you must be with all of this stuff. But there's also, I know that you mentioned that your husband is a cancer survivor. And I guess with everything else, with the career hurdles, personal ones, you're, dealing with and sort of recovering from the cancer battle, how has that shaped how you write, what you write in fiction? What does that do as far as impacting the journalism? How is that part of you shaping your storytelling?
There's the Vermont radio main character, Jay Jordan, is divorced because she and her husband couldn't find their way back after his cancer treatment. And so and at one point in the second Vermont book, she talks another woman whose husband has been diagnosed through the early process of going through chemo and everything. And I liked Jay. Obviously, my husband and I were able to say, we were okay. We came through it okay, but everybody doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
and that does happen. And I like the way I like being able to. And Jay and her husband are friends. After her ex are friends. I liked being able to write about the whole experience in a very blunt but not unhopeful way. That you can have these experiences and you go through them and you stay a family.
I find that I'm going to send a little bit of gratitude out to the universe that I haven't had to handle it, because it sounds incredibly arduous, and yet you keep going and you keep pushing boundaries, and I'm very grateful to the universe at large, whatever that means, that you're able to navigate this and not just come back, but stay together through something so, again, difficult, just in general, difficult. And I guess to me, as I'm listening to you, I'm kind of going, okay, there are all these barriers personally and professionally, as a writer, as a journalist, and you're navigating them all. I guess because I hear that you're navigating them all, I'm wondering, I know this is going to sound weird because this is sort of out of left field a little, but there are people out there who are aspiring writers, who are aspiring journalists, whether on the radio or the written word. What advice do you have someone who is listening to this and is going, I've always wanted to get into radio, even though radio has changed so much, certainly since back when you and I started. But I've always wanted to write a story or write a book. What advice do you have to someone who's just starting to eke their way into that creative field?
Don't give up. Sink your teeth. I mean, the reason this is going to be a little disgusting, you hear a click because I'm playing with a bracelet. This is going to sound kind of disgusting, but I think of myself as a Gila monster. The Gila monster kills its prey by hanging on to it until it dies. Don't let go.
I was just thinking about that. I did not know that that's how the Gila monster kills its prey. But you know what? What's interesting is that notion of never say die, if you will, never give up.
Sink your teeth in and don't let go.
I love it. Okay, so I guess the thing that I have to wonder about, though, is we don't know what the future holds. The things are up in the air in so many facets of life and work right now.
Oh yeah.
But I want to ask you to take out your crystal ball and kind of go, okay, what is the future of storytelling? Whether it's in fiction or journalism, where do you see it going? And what do you think is going to happen 5-10 years from now?
I think people are always going to be telling stories, fiction. The vector, the way we tell them may change. We may read ebooks, we may read on our phone, we may read some different way. We're always going to read. We're always going to need stories. The technology for how we get them, it may change because it always does, but the stories and those who tell them will still be there. As far as journalism goes, I'm just going to make a really hard plea for fact-checking and real professional journalists. Now more than ever, hate the phrase, but it makes the sense. It's right for the moment. We need people who are professionals, who are trained to do the work and see what facts are and present those facts.
Amen. And hallelujah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you completely. And what's interesting, people ask me about, me as a journalist, and I'm like, I'm not an investigative journalist. That's not what I do. I do research based on what my guest provides me, and then I go out and I Google and I find things. But the questions that we're pondering here are sort of from your own mind and your facts, what you do, how you accomplish things. I'm not looking at forecasting anything. But I do kind of want to know from the deepest, darkest parts of ourselves sometimes what our truth is, what your truth is. Right. And so I guess that's my next question is, what is What is that truth for you? What is the truth that you come out with and you go, yeah, this is what I believe more than anything else in the world?
We are all humans created in the image of our creator, and we deserve to be treated with the dignity according that.
Okay. So that sounds good to me. Thank you for that. I have just a few more questions, but I do want to ask before we get into my last few questions, the little sort of rapid fire ones. I do want to ask, first of all, what are the actual names of the two books that are coming out on March 25th?
Hound of the Bonnevilles from Keylight Books is the Grace the Hit Mom #2. And from Level Best, and that's under Nikki Knight. That's under the Nikki Knight pen name. Under my own pen name, The Stuff of Mayhem, which is the Old Stuff Mysteries #2 from Level Best.
Awesome. And so I'm going to put links to those books and links to everything that you've given me to put links to in the show notes. But people learn differently. So I'm going to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, say where someone who's going, I want to know more about Nikki Knight and Kathleen, where can someone find you if they're looking?
You can find me at KathleenMarpleKalb.com. It's my website.
There you go. All right. Thank you for that. I'll put that in the show notes. And I guess the thing that I now want to know, last few questions. First of all, what's the best piece of career advice you've ever received?
From my first news director in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You do this because you can't do anything else. He didn't mean because you're so hopeless that there's nothing else you can do. He meant you do this because there's nothing else that would make you happy.
I've heard the same thing about, for example, acting. You know, a friend of mine met Tom Hanks because they were on a set together, and she asked him for advice, and he said, if you can do anything else, go do that. But if you can't, if all you want to do is act, if all that lights your fire is acting, then you're going to have to do everything you can to make that happen. And I went, when she told me that, I was like, no. But yeah, you have to be dedicated, and you have to be dedicated to the exclusion of all else, which I think is very interesting for someone like you who's got these two different careers. All right. The next rapid fire question is, what's one mystery novel you think everyone should read?
Die for Love by Elizabeth Peters. It's screamingly funny, and it sends up writers' conference and book conferences like nothing else.
All right, then. I'm going to put the link to that in the show notes as well. All right, cool. And then the last couple of questions that I have, and before I ask them, Kathleen, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. This has been so fabulous. I could talk to you. I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 more questions I didn't even get to because we were talking.
Well, thank you so much. This is wonderful. I've had a wonderful time. I love this. This is great.
I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, this is super fun for me too.
You're a terrific host.
Oh,
I hope you are hearing that, because you are a terrific host.
That's very sweet to hear, and I love hearing that. Anytime somebody says something like that, it just makes me feel like I've just finished a really good book. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. All right, so here we go. Last couple of questions. Penultimate question is, what is it that gets you up in the morning? And I don't mean your alarm.
Like to get up. Actually, I think about the work. I get up in the morning, and the first thing I'm thinking about is whatever project I'm working on. I have a period of a half hour before I have to do things for the family. And I get on the treadmill, I put on the playlist for the characters that I'm working on at the particular moment and what's next in the story. So the next thing in the story gets me up.
I love that. And I love that you have playlists for individual characters. That is phenomenal. I'm going to totally rip that off and start doing that, because I've never thought to do a playlist. Instead, what I do is I figure out what the characters look like, and then I find like an actor or celebrity who looks like them.
I like that.
And I have their picture up so I remember who I'm thinking of when I'm writing. So you and I, that you've just totally inspired me. Spotify playlists, here I come. That's really cool. I love it. And I love that you write while you walk on the treadmill. I think that's great. I wrote 5 of my books walking my dog in the woods. I was writing voice to text, and that was how I wrote five of them.
I
Yeah.
don't do that with voice to text. I just think it through, and then later in the day I write it down. I mean,
okay.
If I have a plot twist or something that I just can't get, like this morning, I've been fighting with a short story for 2 weeks, And I was on the treadmill just thinking through the last things to fix with that story.
Is it the Broadway show short story?
No, that one's done. I turned that in.
Ah,
Turned that in. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
yeah, I'm in the middle of writing that. So if you're listening to this and you don't know, we've been asked to, some of us have been asked to participate potentially in a short story anthology that's coming out, and it's based on Broadway show tunes. So I'm very excited about that, and I can't talk more about that, but I'm hopeful that something happens. That would be super fun, considering if. Yeah, it's you know what's exciting about that for me? I'm a huge theater nerd, and in fact, every Friday on this show. Yeah. Oh, really? I didn't know that. Very cool.
Oh, yeah. I was a theater kid. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, me too. And I went to high school. This will inform a little bit of why I'm saying what I'm saying, Kathleen. I went to high school with and did theater with Jeffrey Seller and Andrew Lippa. So they went on to become super successful Broadway people. And every Friday on this show, we have table read of new and unproduced plays. So we get actors who are reading these plays, and the playwrights get to actually hear their work aloud, which I think is really. It's very cool, and it's a useful thing, especially for the playwrights, because they get to hear it instead of just imagining it, which is so important. And so I'm very excited, and I love theater altogether. So being able to write a story that is inspired by a Broadway show tune is really amazing, and I hope something happens with that. So when you're talking about wrestling with the short story, it's a completely different short story for something else, and you said that you worked on it on the treadmill. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I was thinking out a plot point. I got stuck. This one's been fighting me, and I've been because it's for an anthology, and they're a charity anthology. I try to do a couple of those a year.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a bunch of requirements in the anthology call, and I've been having a hard time just getting the pieces together. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear that completely. This Broadway anthology one was it was interesting. I was like, I'm going to write about this. I'm going to write about this. I started fleshing it out and went, oh, this is a whole book. This isn't a short story. This isn't so now I have another book to write, which is great. But the short story, it took a while, and now I'm finally writing it, and I'm going, okay, at least I have another couple of weeks to finish it. Yeah. So that's really cool. Okay, so we got that, the next thing in the story, and my answer to that question, by the way, is usually my cats who sit on me because they're hungry. But and that's how life is. And so now I have the very last question in this. Kathleen, and it is, as I said earlier, it's a simple and silly question, but I found that it yields some profound answers. And the question is this: if you had an airplane, environmentally friendly, of course, that could skywrite anything for the whole world to see, what would you say?
I love you, Stephen and Martin.
Oh, that's so sweet. I'm assuming husband and son. Yeah. I was like, yeah, I figured that's what it was.
I don't usually use their names in public, but that's okay.
Well, I love you, husband and son. I think that's great too. That's fabulous. Thank you so much for that. What a joy-filled answer. That's fabulous. Kathleen, again, I'm super grateful you took the time to be on the show. Congratulations on the 2 books coming out on the same day. I don't think I could ever handle it, but you are obviously not only resilient, but incredibly gifted and capable. So yay, you. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much. It's been a tremendous joy.
Oh, yay. That makes me very happy. So if you're listening to this, you need to go find Kathleen. Click on the show notes link, find her website, find her books. The mom, who's also an assassin, is that's scintillating and titillating. And I'm like, okay, I can't wait for the next book to come out. This is Isolde Trachtenberg for the Your Creative Mind podcast. You know the drill. If you want to subscribe to the show, feel free. If you want to support the show, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/IsoldeT and support the show. I love oat milk lattes, just letting you know. So if you want to do that, that'd be great. Until next time, this is Isolde Trachtenberg for the Your Creative Mind podcast, reminding you, as always, to be bold, be creative, and most of all, be kind. thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're new, and it would mean the world to me if you told a friend about it. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2025. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope.